2 minutes. Yeah, so still 2 more minutes. Will be Michael Ashby, revising the phonetics of the Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for staying to the very end of the session. I'm at UCL, but I'm also the phonetics editor of the current, that's the 6th edition of the Advanced Learners Dictionary, and I was at the 5th edition in '95. What is the Advanced Learners Dictionary? It's a global dictionary for learners of English. It claims to be the largest selling learners dictionary of all. Certainly the most recent edition alone has sold several millions of copies, and total sales to date are in excess of 30 million. It's the central member of a family of ELT dictionaries which now share a common database and a common pronunciation policy. Since the early 90s, it's been independent of either of the great pronouncing dictionaries, and my job has been to develop its pronunciation policies and apply these across the board. Among recent spin-offs, there is an idioms dictionary and a phrasal verbs dictionary, both in 2001, which break new ground by marking the accentual behavior of the entries for the first time. Just to clear up any possible confusion, the ELT dictionaries have nothing to do with the so-called academic dictionaries from Oxford. There's no link with the Oxford English Dictionary, and I have nothing to do with the concise Oxford Dictionary or with the recent Oxford Pronunciation Dictionary. The written version of this talk in the proceedings covers a number of topics that I can't deal with today, and in this presentation I intend only to look at the ones coloured yellow on the slide, though I could conceivably answer questions about the others if you wish. The ALD uses IPA symbols to represent pronunciations, and given its sales, it must be among the most widely disseminated applications of phonetic symbols. The transcription system that I've evolved for it is highly compatible with influential works such as the Longman Pronouncing Dictionary and the Revised English Pronouncing Dictionary, which has now appeared. In my view, compatibility with other influential works is a very important consideration in gaining acceptance from students and their teachers in using phonetic symbols. The de facto standard which these works have more or less in common is based on the Gimson transcription of British English, which of course in essence is a phonemic system, but one designed to have maximum utility to learners. So it represents both qualitative and quantitative differences among English vowels. You see the use of a different symbol and also the length mark to distinguish E from I, for instance. Like other modern transcription systems, the OALD has now added weak vowels, E and U, for which we have the names happy and influence. More about those later. The resulting transcription is no longer strictly phonemic, maybe polysystemic is a more appropriate term, referring to the fact that different systems of vowel contrasts are possible at different positions in structures. I use slanting brackets everywhere in the dictionary, including in the end matter, whether I'm enclosing elements of the system or things which are strictly realizations, such as the glottal stop. Many of the changes I made to the dictionary in the revision of 1995 concerned the vowels of unstressed syllables. Until that revision, the dictionary had been rather conservative in retaining I in many syllables where schwa is now definitely preferred. So until 89, it was showing pronunciations like eyelid, where I would have eyelet, and even things like effortlessness were apparently implied by the transcription, when obviously for me it will be effortlessness, and I guess for all younger speakers. These changes, of course, represent choices from among symbols which were already available. But for other weak syllables, new symbols were required. If we look at the issue of the happy vowel from the point of view of native speakers of English, we find that young native speakers of RP and similar accents certainly don't accept the identification of the happy vowel as the I that they have in kit or bid. Phonetic realizations with relatively open qualities sound old-fashioned or affected, things like city, very, unless, of course, they're regional. Certain northern cities have open vowels in those positions. There are also potential contrasts among vowels in these unstressed positions. So roses is potentially different from rosies, and of course in British English both are different from roses. When we come to the question of non-native speakers, well, there are arguments both for and against augmenting the transcription system with new weak vowels. On the negative side, some learners and their teachers object to the complication of additional vowels, or object to the fact that the resulting transcription is no longer phonemic. Though, of course, the popular ELT transcriptions have never been strictly phonemic, in the sense of using the fewest possible number of symbols. On the pro side, compatibility with other dictionaries is a factor, but for the non-native speaker, the most important consideration is one that doesn't arise at all for native speakers, and I haven't seen this argument rehearsed anywhere else at all, and it is that by introducing the new happy vowel, we protect the very important contrast between E and I in potentially accentable syllables. It's clearly unsatisfactory, in my view, for a learner to have a dictionary where the symbol cap I represents a range of qualities, including the typical happy quality. This will apparently sanction the importing of a closer quality into syllables of the type bid, which is the typical learner's characteristic error. Having decided to make use of a happy vowel, where does it occur? Well, it's not a matter of doing a search and replace on the dictionary and finding all the word final cap I's. As you go through the thousands of headwords, you find there's an intricate pattern of occurrences in other positions. What the contexts have in common, essentially, is that the vowel is in unaccentable open syllables. The syllables may get phonetically closed by inflection or as a result of contractions in things like he's for he is. Pre-vocality within words, there's no problem in things like react. Pre-consonantally, it's more complicated. It depends what the two elements are and what kind of boundary there is at that point. But one place where it occurs, for instance, is at the end of so-called initial combining forms like ambi, equi, and poly, and so on. I wonder if there is a loose connection. I'm doing nothing, but I will continue. Though I focus so far on segmental matters, another important function for a learner's dictionary is the indication of stress patterns, whether in simple words or compounds or in idioms and phrases. Experience suggests that the most you can hope to use is 2 different stress marks. I work on the assumption that nobody reads the instructions, and the transcriptions must be self-interpreting. The stress marks in dictionaries are, of course, mainly accent marks rather than stress marks. And this is exploited in marking the accentual properties of longer phrases, where if I just include a single stress mark, I know that the user will interpret this to mean the tonic rather than just a rhythmic stress within that longer phrase. And you might think that English is so well described that there is nothing left to discover about marking accentual patterns on idioms and phrases. But there are, in fact, there are 2 undescribed regularities in the accentual behavior of these expressions. Phrasal verbs, for instance, so things like go away, come back, very common, a notorious difficulty for learners, and they have an apparently puzzling stress behavior. But an examination based on about 6,000 verbs shows that you can go a long way with a simple division into 2 classes, 1 stress verbs and 2 stress verbs. And this cuts across any grammatical categorization, at least any grammatical categorization that we might consider using in ELT. 1 stress verbs have a single stress on the first word component.
This is to wake you up.
Examples of things like come to something, go for somebody, look at something, The second word is never stressed. The one here is beautiful. Two stress verbs are double stressed. They have a secondary stress and a primary stress. And they undergo regular stress shift like other double stressed words, such as afternoon or automatic. In the case of two stressed verbs that are separable, sometimes the stress pattern results from stress shift. In other cases, because an accentable object is placed between the two elements of the verb, and the position between the two elements is actually after the verb for purposes of word order. I'm coming to the end in several senses. From the learner's point of view, the end is a guide which is out of sight and which can be interpreted without too much reference to explanatory matter. At the same time as the policies were being evolved, the discursive pronunciation matter was taken out of the dictionary and put on the end paper in this way. So the treatment of phrasal verbs, for example, is dealt with in just 2 paragraphs. The aim is to give users the simplest and most directly accessible pronunciation guidance that can be devised.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Okay, this one.
Very quick one. It's about the length. You mark the E with the dots, and that also applies to the other long vowels, and the and probably the R as well, all of them?
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes, yes. Of course, I just use that as an illustration.
So, no other questions? Okay, well, I guess then we'll close the session. Thank you very much.